The rain hammered against the windows of my small apartment, each drop a reminder of that night 3 years ago when I fled Chicago with nothing but a duffel bag and the terrifying knowledge of what grew inside me. Lightning flashed, illuminating my cramped living room for a brief second before plunging it back into shadow. In that flash, I caught sight of my reflection in the mirror. Hollow-cheeked, dark circles under my eyes, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. I barely recognized myself anymore. "Mommy?" A small voice called from the bedroom doorway. "We can't sleep." I turned to see my twins, Liam and Luna, clutching their matching stuffed elephants. At 2.5 years old, they were identical in so many ways to their father, those piercing blue eyes, the same strong jaw already forming, even as toddlers. Every time I looked at them, I saw him. It was both my greatest joy and my deepest terror. "Come here, my loves," I whispered, opening my arms. They padded across the worn carpet in their matching pajamas, little feet shuffling. As they snuggled against me, I breathed in their baby shampoo scent, letting it calm my frayed nerves. 3 years running. 3 years looking over my shoulder. 3 years of cheap apartments, cash jobs, and fake names. 3 years of loving these children who were half him. I hadn't always been Sarah Thompson. Once I was Eliza Reeves, personal assistant to Anthony Russo, the most powerful restaurant owner in Chicago. At least, that's what his business card said. What they didn't mention was that his restaurant empire was merely the glossy veneer covering a vast criminal network that controlled half the city. I still remember my first day at Russo Enterprises. Fresh out of college with a business degree and crushing student debt, I'd been desperate for the job. The elegant high-rise office with its gleaming marble floors and panoramic views of Lake Michigan had intimidated me, but not as much as he had. "Miss Reeves." His voice had been like velvet over gravel when we were introduced. "Welcome to the family." I hadn't understood then what being part of his family truly meant. Anthony Russo was not what I'd expected. No flashy gold chains or loud suits. Instead, he wore tailored charcoal gray, crisp white shirts, and a single platinum watch worth more than my entire year's salary. He moved with the quiet confidence of a predator who never needed to rush, knowing his prey would eventually tire. I worked directly under his operations manager, but Anthony took a special interest in me from the beginning. Small assignments at first: deliver this package, schedule this meeting, don't ask questions. The pay was exceptional, the benefits unheard of, and gradually, I became indispensable. "You have a good head for numbers, Eliza," he'd told me one night as I worked late, reorganizing his appointment calendar. I hadn't heard him approach. He moved silently despite his imposing frame. His cologne enveloped me before I even looked up, sandalwood and something darker, more primal. "And you know when to stay quiet. That's rare." I'd mumbled some reply, my heart hammering against my ribs as he leaned over my desk, his broad shoulders blocking the light, casting me in his shadow. "You should join me for dinner tomorrow night," he said. It wasn't a question. That dinner changed everything. The private room at his flagship restaurant, Oro. The wine that probably cost more than my rent. The way his eyes, those impossible blue eyes, never left my face as I spoke. He listened as if everything I said fascinated him. This man who commanded an empire. "Why me?" I'd asked after the third glass of wine had loosened my tongue. His smile had been slow, deliberate. "Because you're different, Eliza. You see things as they are, not as you wish them to be." I didn't understand what he meant then. I was naive enough to think it was a compliment. A crash of thunder pulled me back to the present, making the twins flinch in my arms. "It's okay," I whispered, stroking their dark hair, his hair. Just the sky being noisy. Luna looked up at me with those eyes. "Is the sky angry, Mommy? If only she knew how much scarier an angry man could be than an angry sky." "No, sweetheart. The sky is just playing drums," I said, forcing a smile. I carried them back to their shared bedroom, tucking them into their beds with extra kisses and promises that the storm would pass. As I watched them drift back to sleep, my throat tightened with the now familiar mixture of love and dread. They deserved so much better than a life on the run. A tiny apartment in a forgettable town outside Portland, where I worked 2 jobs, Mornings at a coffee shop and evenings doing remote bookkeeping work. We had enough to get by, but not enough for the life they should have had. Not enough for the doctors to fully investigate why Liam sometimes struggled to catch his breath when he ran too hard. Back in the living room, I pulled out the locked box from under the loose floorboard beneath my second-hand couch. Inside was 4,217, my emergency fund, along with 3 different sets of identification documents and a small .38 revolver I'd never fired but kept loaded. Next to these was a worn photo I couldn't bring myself to destroy. Anthony and me at the charity gala, his arm possessively around my waist, both of us smiling as if we had a future. That was 2 weeks before I discovered what happened to people who betrayed Anthony Russo. I'd been working late again, finalizing preparations for a major restaurant opening, when I'd accidentally opened the wrong spreadsheet on the shared drive. Instead of supplier costs, I found myself looking at shipment schedules, coded payments, and what could only be described as a hit list. Names with dates next to them. Dates that, when I later checked the Chicago Tribune archives, matched exactly with reported accidents and suicides. I'd closed the file immediately, but not before Marco, Anthony's head of security, had seen me from the doorway. His face had remained impassive, but I knew in that moment I'd signed my death warrant. I should have run that night. Instead, I'd convinced myself I was overreacting, that Anthony would protect me, that what we had, those nights in his penthouse, his promises, the way he looked at me as if I were the only woman in the world, meant something. The next day, I overheard Marco and Anthony in his office. She saw the Dresden file, Marco's voice, flat and emotionless. A long pause. "You're sure?" "Yes, boss." Another pause, longer this time. "I'll handle it." Just 3 words, but they'd chilled me to the bone. I knew then what handling it meant in Anthony's world. That night, Anthony had been particularly attentive. He'd brought me to his penthouse, cooked dinner himself, a rarity, and opened a bottle of wine he'd been saving for a special occasion. To us, he'd toasted, his eyes never leaving mine as we clinked glasses. I'd pretended to drink while my mind raced through escape scenarios. "You seem distracted tonight, cara mia," he'd said, brushing a strand of hair from my face with fingers that had likely ordered dozens of deaths. "Something on your mind?" I forced a smile. "Just tired. End of quarter reports." He'd studied me for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You know you can tell me anything, don't you, Eliza? Anything at all." I nodded, wondering if he could hear my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. "I would never let anyone hurt you," he continued, taking my hand. His touch, once electrifying, now made my skin crawl. "You're mine to protect, always." That night, as he slept beside me, I slipped from his bed for the last time. I took nothing from his apartment that could be traced. Instead, I went to my own place, packed essentials, emptied my meager savings account, and vanished. 2 weeks later, holed up in a motel room 3 states away, I discovered I was pregnant. Another crack of thunder brought me back to the present. I returned the emergency box to its hiding place and checked the locks on the doors and windows. A ritual I performed at least 3 times every night. The storm was getting worse, wind now howling around the eaves of the old building. I was making tea to calm my nerves when I heard it, a sound that didn't belong with the rain and wind. The subtle crunch of tires on wet gravel. Headlights swept across my living room wall for the briefest moment before going dark. My neighborhood wasn't the type where people made social calls at 11:30 p.m. during thunderstorms. I moved silently to the window, carefully peering through a crack in the blinds. A black SUV with tinted windows sat in the small parking lot. Not just any SUV, a Mercedes G-Wagon, exactly like the ones Anthony's security team used. My blood turned to ice. It couldn't be. After 3 years, how could he possibly? A car door opened, and a large figure stepped out, unfurling an umbrella. Even through the rain and darkness, I would know that silhouette anywhere. The broad shoulders, the confident stance, the way he surveyed his surroundings before moving, a predator assessing his territory. Anthony. He wasn't alone. 2 more men exited the vehicle, moving to flank him. Even from here, I could see the telltale bulge of shoulder holsters beneath their jackets. My mind went blank with terror for one paralyzing moment before instinct kicked in. I rushed to the twins' room, scooping up Luna first, then Liam. They stirred, but didn't fully wake as I placed them on the floor of my bedroom closet, wrapping them in blankets. "Stay here, my loves," I whispered. "Stay quiet like we practiced in our hiding game. Don't come out until Mommy comes to get you." Their sleepy nods broke my heart. We'd practiced this game too many times for them to question it. I grabbed my emergency box, shoved my feet into sneakers, and had just reached for my phone when I heard it. 3 precise knocks on my front door. "Eliza," called a voice I'd tried so hard to forget. "Open the door, cara mia. I know you're in there." Anthony had found me, and I had nowhere left to run. My hands trembled as I backed away from the door, phone clutched to my chest. 3 years of running, of looking over my shoulder, of nightmares where those blue eyes found me in the dark, and now he was here, separated from me by nothing but a flimsy door with a cheap chain lock. "Eliza." His voice was calm, patient. The voice of a man who knew he had all the time in the world. "Don't make this more difficult than it needs to be." My mind raced. The back window? No. His men would be covering all exits. The neighbors? Elderly Mr. Peterson on one side, who was half deaf, and the young couple on the other, who worked night shifts. No one to help. My finger hovered over the 9 on my phone. But what would I tell the police? That the father of my children, a man whose name I'd never put on their birth certificates, had found us? A man who, as far as I knew, had never been charged with a crime despite the empire of violence he controlled? "I just want to talk," Anthony continued. I could picture him standing there, immaculate, even in the storm, not a hair out of place. 5 minutes. Then, if you still want me to leave, I will. Lies. Anthony Russo never walked away from what he considered his. "You have the wrong apartment," I called back, trying to disguise my voice. "There's no Eliza here." A soft chuckle from the other side of the door sent shivers down my spine. "Sarah Thompson, then. That's what you're calling yourself these days, isn't it? Or should I call you Elena Davis? Maria Collins? You've had quite a collection of names since you left Chicago." My knees nearly buckled. He knew everything. Had he always known? Had he been tracking me all this time, watching from the shadows as I built this fragile new life? "What do you want?" I asked, moving closer to the door despite myself. The pull he had on me even now was terrifying. "Open the door, and I'll tell you." My fingers brushed against the chain. One simple movement and he would be in my life again. Back in my home. My brain screamed at me to run, to grab the twins and flee through the fire escape. But something deeper, something I couldn't name, made me hesitate. "How did you find me?" I needed to know. "Your mother's illness." 2 words that made the floor drop from beneath me. Mom had been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer 3 months ago. I'd risked everything to visit her in the hospice in Seattle, using yet another fake ID. I'd been so careful. "You've been watching my mother?" Rage replaced fear, hot and sudden. "She's dying, Anthony. She has nothing to do with this. I've been paying for her care since the diagnosis," he replied simply. "The best oncologists. Experimental treatments. Anything that might help." I couldn't process what he was saying. My mother's doctors had told her about an anonymous benefactor who'd covered her transfer to the prestigious cancer center. That had been Anthony? "Why would you—" "Because she's the grandmother of my children," he cut in, his voice hardening for the first time. "Children you kept from me for nearly 3 years. There it was, the real reason he'd come. "How long have you known?" I whispered, leaning my forehead against the door. "About the twins?" 6 months. "About where you were?" 3 months. "I've had men watching this apartment for weeks, making sure you were safe." Safe. As if I'd ever been in danger from anyone but him. "If you knew where I was, why wait until now?" I needed to be sure. Of what? That they're mine. I laughed, a harsh sound with no humor in it. "Have you seen them? They're the spitting image of you. Open the door, Eliza." No longer a request, a command. My hand moved to the chain before I could stop myself. Some part of me, the part that had once loved him, that still woke breathless from dreams of his touch, wanted to see him, to end this chase once and for all. The door swung open. Anthony stood in the hallway, larger than I remembered, filling the doorframe with his presence. The years had been kind to him, a few more strands of silver in his dark hair perhaps, lines at the corners of his eyes slightly deeper. He wore a black overcoat, perfectly tailored as always. Not a drop of rain on him despite the storm. Behind him stood Marco and another man I didn't recognize, both scanning the hallway, hands inside their jackets. His eyes, those devastating blue eyes, traveled over me slowly, taking in the changes. I was thinner now, my once carefully maintained appearance replaced by the practical simplicity of a single mother with barely enough time to shower, let alone style her hair or apply makeup. "You look tired," he said softly. Not what I expected. Not accusations or threats. Just concern, real or feigned, I couldn't tell. "That happens when you're raising twins alone while working 2 jobs, I replied, keeping my voice steady. Something flickered across his face. Regret? Anger? It was gone before I could identify it. "May I come in?" As if I had a choice. As if he wouldn't simply push past me if I refused. Still, maintaining the illusion of control seemed important. 5 minutes, I said, stepping back. "And keep your voice down. They're sleeping." I watched as Anthony signaled to his men to remain outside. He stepped into my apartment, his expensive cologne bringing with it a rush of memories I'd tried so hard to bury. Nights at the opera, mornings in his bed, his hands in my hair as he whispered promises against my skin. He took in my small living room with a single sweep of his gaze, the second-hand furniture, the toys hastily stashed in a basket, the pile of bills on the coffee table. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "This is how you've been living?" he asked quietly. "This is how most people live, Anthony," I shot back. "Not everyone has penthouses and private jets." He unbuttoned his coat but didn't remove it. "You could have had all of that. You still could." "At what price?" His eyes narrowed. "Is that why you ran? You thought I would hurt you?" The absurdity of his question made me laugh again. "I saw the Dresden file, Anthony. I know what happens to people who become inconvenient to you." Understanding dawned on his face. "You thought..." Christ, Eliza. He ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of genuine frustration I remembered from our time together. "I wasn't going to hurt you. I was going to propose." The world tilted sideways. "What?" "The night you left. The wine I was saving for a special occasion? There was a ring in my safe. I was going to ask you to marry me." I shook my head, unwilling to believe him. "Then why did you tell Marco you would handle it when he told you I'd seen the file?" "Because I needed to handle it, explain things to you, tell you the truth about my business before asking you to be my wife." He took a step closer, and I fought the urge to back away. "I never would have hurt you, Eliza. Never." "Your business," I repeated flatly. "You mean your empire built on extortion, drugs, and murder? It's more complicated than that. It always is with you." A sound from the hallway made us both freeze. The soft padding of tiny feet. I turned to see Luna standing in the doorway of the living room, her elephant clutched to her chest, eyes wide with sleep and confusion. "Mommy," she called softly. "Who's that man?" Time stopped. I couldn't breathe as Anthony slowly turned toward the sound of her voice. I watched as he saw his daughter for the first time, this perfect little person with his eyes, his jaw, his dark hair falling in sleep-mussed waves around her face. The expression that crossed his features then was one I'd never seen before on Anthony Russo's face. Shock. Wonder. Something that looked almost like fear. He took a half step toward her, then stopped, looking back at me as if asking permission. I moved quickly to Luna, scooping her up in my arms, positioning myself between her and her father. "This is an old friend of Mommy's," I told her, my voice surprisingly steady. "He was just leaving." Luna peered over my shoulder at Anthony, studying him with that solemn intensity both twins sometimes showed, another trait they'd inherited from him. "You look like Liam," she announced with a child's directness. Anthony's face did something complicated then, a muscle working in his jaw. "Does he?" he asked, his voice rougher than before. I turned away, carrying Luna back toward the bedroom. I'm putting her back to bed. Please be gone when I come back. It was a futile request, and I knew it. In the bedroom, I found Liam still asleep in the closet nest I'd made. I placed Luna beside him, tucking the blanket around them both. "Go back to sleep, sweetheart," I whispered, kissing her forehead. "The man has sad eyes, Mommy," Luna murmured as she drifted back to sleep. My throat tightened. Even at 2.5, she saw too much. When I returned to the living room, Anthony hadn't moved. He stood like a statue, staring at the children's drawings magnetized to my refrigerator door. "She's beautiful," he said without turning. "They both are?" It wasn't really a question, but I answered anyway. "Yes. Twins run in my family. My mother was a twin." "I know. You told me once." He turned to face me then. "Why did you run, Eliza? The real reason." "I told you. I saw what happens to people who know too much about your business, and that's it? You didn't trust me enough to explain? Trust you?" I hissed, keeping my voice low for the twins' sake. "You're a criminal, Anthony. A killer." "I've never killed anyone who didn't deserve it," he said simply. "Who gets to decide that? You?" "Sometimes, yes." The casual admission sent a chill through me. This was the reality I'd been running from. Not just a dangerous man, but a man who believed his power gave him the right to decide who lived and who died. "I need to see him," Anthony said after a moment. "My son." "No." The word came out sharp, desperate. His eyes hardened. "They're my children too, Eliza. You have no legal claim to them. Their birth certificates list the father as unknown." Something dangerous flickered in his expression. "We both know that's a lie. A DNA test would prove it in seconds." "And then what?" I demanded. "You'll take them from me? Raise them in your world of violence and fear?" "I would never separate them from their mother." He took a step closer. "But I won't be separated from them either. Not anymore." We stood facing each other, the air between us charged with 3 years of absence and secrets. "What do you want, Anthony?" I asked finally, exhaustion seeping into my bones. "I want my family," he replied simply. "You. The twins. All of us. Together." "That's not possible." "Why not?" "Because I don't love you anymore," I lied. The biggest lie I'd ever told. He studied my face for a long moment. "You're still a terrible liar, Karamia." Before I could respond, a harsh cough echoed from the bedroom, followed by the unmistakable sound of a child struggling to breathe. Liam's asthma. I pushed past Anthony, running to the bedroom. Liam was sitting up in the closet, face flushed, hands at his throat, eyes wide with panic as he fought for air. Luna was awake beside him, her small face crumpled with worry. "Liam's sick again, Mommy," she whispered. I grabbed his inhaler from the bedside table, helping him take a puff as I'd done countless times before. But this time, it didn't seem to be working. His lips were taking on a bluish tint, his breathing becoming more labored instead of easier. Fear unlike anything I'd felt before gripped my heart. "He needs a hospital," came Anthony's voice from behind me. He'd followed me into the bedroom and was now kneeling beside us, his eyes fixed on our struggling son. "Now." I nodded, too terrified to argue. Anthony didn't hesitate. He gathered Liam into his arms with surprising gentleness, nodding for me to bring Luna. "My men will drive. I'll sit with him in the back," he said, already moving toward the door. "Pack what they need, quickly." As I scrambled to grab essentials, I caught sight of Anthony whispering to Liam, one large hand gently rubbing his back as he struggled for breath. Our eyes met over our son's dark head. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that our lives had changed forever. Anthony Russo had found his children, and he would never let them go again, which meant he would never let me go either. The hospital waiting room was painfully bright after the darkness of the storm. I sat rigid in an uncomfortable plastic chair, Luna asleep across my lap, her weight both comforting and constricting. My eyes never left the swinging doors through which they'd taken Liam, Anthony following close behind. "He's going to be okay," Anthony had assured me before disappearing with the doctors, his tone brooking no argument, as if he could command even illness to retreat from his son. Marco stood by the entrance, his face impassive as ever, while the second guard positioned himself near the emergency exit. Anthony's men, creating a perimeter, protecting us, or ensuring we couldn't leave. I stroked Luna's hair, my mind replaying the frantic drive to the hospital. Anthony in the back seat with Liam, speaking to him in soothing tones. First in English, then slipping into Italian when Liam's panic worsened. I hadn't known Anthony spoke Italian to children. There was so much I didn't know about the man who was my children's father. "Miss Thompson?" I looked up to see a nurse approaching. "Yes? How is he? How's my son?" "He's stabilized," she said with a reassuring smile. "The doctor is still examining him, but his breathing has improved significantly." Relief washed over me, so powerful I nearly wept. "Can I see him?" "Soon. The doctor wants to run a few more tests." She hesitated. "Your husband asked me to let you know he's staying with your son." He said not to worry. "My husband." I didn't correct her. "Thank you," I managed to say. When she left, I glanced at Marco, who was watching me with that unnerving steadiness. "Has he always known where I was?" I asked, unable to help myself. Marco's expression didn't change. No, but he was looking. Every day. The simple confirmation sent a complicated mixture of emotions through me. Fear, certainly, but also something else, something I refused to name. "Why now? After 3 years?" Marco studied me for a long moment before answering. "The boss believed you'd return on your own. When you didn't..." He shrugged one shoulder. "He never stopped looking, but he only found you when you went to see your mother. And he's been watching us since then? For 3 months?" "Protecting you," Marco corrected. "Making sure you were safe." I laughed bitterly. Safe from whom? The only person I've been running from is him. Marco didn't respond, but something in his expression made me uneasy. Before I could press further, the doors swung open, and Anthony emerged, speaking quietly with a doctor. Even in this sterile environment, among medical professionals and worried families, he commanded attention. People instinctively moved out of his path, responding to something primal in his bearing that signaled predator. He spotted me, and nodded once before returning to his conversation with the doctor. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I could see the doctor's demeanor change from professional detachment to eager agreement. Money changing hands? A threat? With Anthony, it was impossible to know where charm ended and coercion began. When he finally approached me, his face was grim. "What did they say?" I asked, fear returning. "You said he was going to be okay. He is. For now." Anthony sat beside me, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "But his condition is more serious than simple asthma. The doctor wants to admit him for observation and more tests." My stomach dropped. "What kind of tests?" "Pulmonary function, blood work, cardiac evaluation." He named each one with clinical precision, as if distancing himself from the reality that these tests were for his son. Our son. "I can't afford..." "Don't." He cut me off, anger flashing in his eyes. "Don't even finish that sentence. Money is not an issue. It never was." I looked away, shame and pride warring within me. "I didn't want your money, clearly." His gaze swept over my worn clothes, the holes in my sneakers. "You've been struggling, working yourself to exhaustion. While our children..." He stopped, getting his emotions under control. "Why didn't you at least access the account I set up for you before we even met? It's still there, untouched." I stared at him. "What account?" Something like surprise crossed his face. "The trust. 5 million, in your name. I showed you the paperwork the night of the Ferguson merger." I shook my head slowly. I thought that was just for the project. Temporary access. "It was yours, Eliza. It still is." He studied me. "You really didn't know?" "No." He leaned back, processing this. "So you've been working 2 jobs, living in that apartment, struggling to provide for our children. When all this time you could have..." He cut himself off, jaw tight. "I wouldn't have taken it even if I'd known," I said quietly. Out of pride or fear. Both, I thought, but didn't say. The silence stretched between us, broken only by the hospital sounds and Luna's soft breathing. Finally, Anthony spoke again, his voice lower. "Has he had these attacks before?" I nodded. "A few times. The doctor in Seattle said it was asthma, prescribed the inhaler. But it's been getting worse. And you didn't think to get a second opinion? More tests? The accusation stung, not least because I'd asked myself the same question countless times. I did what I could with what I had, Anthony. Health insurance isn't exactly easy to get when you're living under a false identity. Regret flickered across his face. I didn't mean... He sighed. I'm not blaming you. I just can't understand why you chose this life for them, for yourself. I chose safety, I said firmly. From me. Not a question. Yes. I would never have hurt you, Eliza. Never. The intensity in his eyes made my heart stutter. You were the one person in my life who saw me, really saw me, not the power or the money or the fear I instill in others. Just me. I saw all of it, Anthony, I whispered. Including the darkness. He didn't deny it. And you ran. I had to protect our children, from their father. From your world. He was silent for a long moment, his eyes moving from my face to Luna, sleeping peacefully in my arms, unaware of the tension surrounding her. When he spoke again, his voice was different, resolute, final. That life is over now, he said. You're coming home. All three of you. Not a request. A decision already made. No, I said, more out of instinct than hope. We have a life here. This isn't a life, Eliza, he said, gesturing to encompass everything. My clothes, the sleeping child in mismatched pajamas, the cheap apartment we'd fled. This is survival, barely. It's what we have. It's not what you'll have anymore. His tone softened slightly. I've missed 3 years of their lives. I won't miss another day. Before I could respond, a nurse appeared. Mr. Russo, you can see your son now. Anthony stood, extending his hand to me. Come. He'll want to see you. I hesitated only briefly before taking his hand, shifting Luna in my arms. His fingers closed around mine, warm and strong, the familiar calluses on his palm a tactile memory I'd tried so hard to forget. Marco moved to take Luna from me, but Anthony shook his head. No. The family stays together. Family. Such a simple word, so complex in meaning. Liam's hospital room was dimly lit, the small figure in the bed making my heart contract painfully. Tubes and wires connected him to machines that beeped steadily, monitoring his every breath. He looked so tiny, so vulnerable. Mommy, he called weakly when he saw me. His eyes, so like Anthony's, moved to the man beside me. Are you the man Luna saw? Anthony stepped forward, his movements carefully controlled, as if approaching a wounded animal. Yes, I am. My name is Anthony. You look like me, Liam observed solemnly. Anthony's smile was unlike any I'd seen on him before. Soft, genuine, touched with wonder. Yes, I do. Or rather, you look like me. Liam considered this. Are you my daddy? The question hung in the air, simple, yet monumental. I felt Anthony tense beside me, waiting for my intervention, my denial perhaps, but I was tired. Tired of running, tired of lying, tired of facing everything alone. And seeing Liam in that hospital bed had crystallized something I'd been avoiding for 3 years. My children deserved more than I alone could give them. Yes, sweetheart, I said softly. This is your daddy. Anthony's sharp intake of breath was the only indication of his surprise. His eyes met mine over Liam's head, filled with an emotion I couldn't name. Why haven't you been with us before? Liam asked, direct as always. Anthony sat carefully on the edge of the bed. Because I couldn't find you, he answered simply. I've been looking for a very long time. Were we hiding? Yes, I interjected. We were playing a very long game of hide and seek. And I won, Liam said, a small smile appearing despite his exhaustion. Yes, you did, Anthony agreed, reaching out to gently touch Liam's hand. You won. Luna stirred in my arms, blinking sleepily before her eyes focused on her brother. Liam sick? She asked. Yes, but the doctors are making him better, I assured her, moving closer to the bed so she could see her twin was okay. Daddy's here, Liam told Luna matter-of-factly, pointing at Anthony. Luna's eyes widened. She looked from Anthony to me, seeking confirmation. When I nodded, she studied Anthony with that unnerving intensity both twins sometimes displayed. "We have the same eyes," she announced. "Yes," Anthony said softly. "You have my eyes." "And my nose?" Luna asked, touching her small nose. Anthony smiled. "Your nose is all your mother's, perfect." The casual compliment made heat rise to my cheeks. I placed Luna on the bed next to Liam, watching as the twins instinctively shifted to accommodate each other, a synchronized dance they'd been performing since before birth. "They've never been separated," I told Anthony quietly. "Not for a single night." He nodded, understanding what I wasn't saying. Whatever happened next, the twins must stay together. A doctor entered the room, clipboard in hand. "Mr. and Mrs. Russo, could I speak with you for a moment?" Again, I didn't correct the assumption. Anthony placed a hand at the small of my back as we stepped into the hallway, the familiar gesture both comforting and unsettling. "We've stabilized Liam's breathing, but I'm concerned about some of his preliminary test results," the doctor explained. "His oxygen saturation levels are lower than I'd like to see, and there are some anomalies in his heart rhythm that warrant further investigation." "What are you saying?" I asked, fear clutching at my throat. "I'd like to transfer Liam to Children's Hospital in Seattle," the doctor said. "They have a pediatric pulmonary specialist who could better evaluate his condition." "Seattle is over 3 hours from here," I pointed out. "It's the best facility in the region for pediatric cardiopulmonary issues," the doctor replied. Anthony's hand tightened slightly on my back. "When would he need to be transferred?" "As soon as possible. Tomorrow morning, ideally." "Make the arrangements," Anthony said decisively. "Whatever he needs." The doctor nodded. "I'll start the paperwork." He hesitated. "There are financial considerations." "Not an issue," Anthony cut in. "My assistant will handle everything." After the doctor left, I turned to face Anthony. "Seattle is where my mother is, I know." His expression softened slightly. "You can see her while we're there. We." "I told you, Eliza. I'm not leaving my children again. Where they go, I go. And where you go, your security goes," I said, nodding toward Marco, still stationed at the end of the hallway. "Always." No apology, no explanation. Just fact. I closed my eyes briefly, feeling the walls of my carefully constructed life crumbling around me. I need to go back to the apartment, pack some things for the twins, for the hospital stay. Marco will take you. I'll stay with the children. The thought of leaving the twins with Anthony, a man they'd just met, a man I'd fled from, made panic rise in my throat. But looking at him now, seeing the concern in his eyes as he glanced back toward Liam's room, I knew he would protect them with his life. "Okay," I agreed. "But I'll be back in an hour, no longer." He nodded. "I'll be here." As I followed Marco toward the exit, I glanced back to see Anthony returning to the hospital room, his tall frame silhouetted in the doorway for a moment before he disappeared inside. To our children. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean, the air sharp with the scent of rain-soaked earth. Marco led me to the SUV, opening the passenger door with unexpected courtesy. "He never stopped looking for you," Marco said as we pulled away from the hospital. Not for a single day. I stared out at the wet streets, trying to process everything that had happened in the span of a few hours. Did he know? About the pregnancy? No. Marco kept his eyes on the road, not until he found you. Would it have mattered? If he'd known. Marco glanced at me briefly. It would have changed everything. The boss. He values family above all else. Family. Such a loaded word in Anthony's world. Family meant loyalty, protection, belonging. It also meant ownership, control. "He won't let us go, will he?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "No," Marco replied simply. "He won't." As we pulled up to my apartment building, I saw it differently now. The peeling paint, the broken security light, the rusty playground equipment in the small yard. For 3 years, this had been our sanctuary. Now it just looked sad, inadequate. "I'll wait here," Marco said. Inside, the apartment felt empty, abandoned already. I moved through the rooms, gathering clothes, toys, the stuffed elephants the twins couldn't sleep without. In the bathroom, I caught sight of myself in the mirror, pale, exhausted, fear etched into every line of my face. For 3 years, I'd been running from Anthony Russo. Now he'd found us, and nothing would ever be the same again. The question was, what happened next? The transfer to Seattle Children's Hospital went smoothly the next morning. Too smoothly. A private ambulance appeared precisely at 8 a.m., along with a medical team that clearly wasn't standard hospital staff. The head nurse who'd been caring for Liam overnight looked both impressed and intimidated. "Your husband has connections," she murmured to me as we prepared Liam for transport. I didn't respond. Anthony's connections were precisely what had terrified me 3 years ago. He'd stayed the entire night, settling into the chair beside Liam's bed, with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to making any space his own. I'd dozed fitfully on the small couch with Luna, waking often to find Anthony's eyes on me in the dim light, his expression unreadable. Now, as I watched the medical team transfer Liam to the transport stretcher, Anthony spoke quietly into his phone, issuing directions in that calm, commanding tone that expected immediate obedience. "The penthouse needs to be prepared." "Yes, all of it. Security protocols alpha level. Dr. Kessler should be on standby." "No, I want him personally. Price is not an issue." I turned away, focusing on explaining to the twins what was happening. "We're going to a bigger hospital in Seattle," I told them, keeping my voice bright, "with doctors who specialize in making little lungs work better." "Will Daddy come too?" Luna asked, loud enough for Anthony to hear. She'd taken to the term with surprising ease, as if she'd been waiting her whole life to say it. Anthony ended his call and approached us, kneeling to Luna's eye level. "Yes, Principessa. Daddy will be there the whole time." The Italian endearment slipped out naturally, and Luna beamed in response. Already she was falling under his spell, the same charismatic gravity that had pulled me into his orbit years ago. "Can we go in your big car?" Liam asked from the stretcher, his voice stronger today, though still worryingly raspy. "The doctors need to take you in a special medical vehicle," Anthony explained, "but Luna can ride with me, if that's okay with your mother." He glanced up at me, a question in his eyes. I hesitated. The thought of separating the twins, even briefly, went against every instinct, but the alternative, riding in the ambulance while leaving Luna alone with Anthony, seemed equally impossible. "I'll go with Liam," I said finally. "You take Luna, but we stay together on the road. No detours, no separating." Something like approval flickered in Anthony's eyes. "Agreed." The journey to Seattle was surreal. I sat beside Liam in the ambulance, watching the medical team monitor his vitals with professional efficiency. Through the small rear window, I could see Anthony's Mercedes following at a precise distance, never falling behind, never drawing too close. Liam drifted in and out of sleep, the medication making him drowsy. During his waking moments, his questions were all about Anthony. "Is Daddy rich? He has a fancy watch. Does Daddy live in a castle? Luna thinks so. Why didn't you tell us about Daddy before?" Each question pierced my heart. How could I explain to a 2-year-old why I'd kept his father from him? How could I make him understand my fear without making Anthony into a villain? "Sometimes grown-ups make complicated decisions," I said finally. "Daddy and I, we had some things to figure out, but now he found us," Liam said, satisfaction in his small voice. "So we can be a real family, a real family." Such a simple concept to a child. So impossibly complex in reality. By the time we reached Seattle Children's Hospital, I'd steeled myself for what was coming. Anthony Russo was back in our lives, and fighting it would only hurt the twins. For their sake, especially for Liam's health, I would need to find a way to coexist with the man I'd run from, the man who, despite everything, still made my pulse quicken when his eyes met mine. The hospital had clearly been prepared for our arrival. We were whisked through a private entrance to a luxurious suite that looked more like a hotel room than a hospital ward. A team of specialists was waiting, including a distinguished older doctor who greeted Anthony with the familiarity of a long acquaintance. "We'll start the comprehensive assessment immediately," the doctor told us. "Don't worry. We'll take excellent care of your son." The next few hours passed in a blur of tests, consultations, and medical terminology that left my head spinning. Through it all, Anthony remained a steady presence, asking incisive questions, demanding clear explanations, ensuring Liam was comfortable at every stage. Luna stayed close to me, unusually quiet, sensing the gravity of the situation despite her young age. It was past noon when Dr. Kessler, the pediatric cardiopulmonary specialist Anthony had specifically requested, called us into a consultation room. Luna had finally fallen asleep on a cot the nurses had provided, exhausted by the morning's events. "I've reviewed all of Liam's tests," Dr. Kessler began, his expression serious. "He has what we call congenital pulmonary valve stenosis, a narrowing of the valve that regulates blood flow from the heart to the lungs." The room seemed to tilt around me. Is it serious?" "In Liam's case, yes. The stenosis is severe enough to be restricting blood flow significantly, which explains his breathing difficulties and the bluish tint you've sometimes noticed in his lips." "Can it be treated?" Anthony asked, his voice controlled but tight. "Yes. He needs surgery to repair or replace the valve." Dr. Kessler's eyes moved between us. "The good news is that with proper treatment, children with this condition often go on to lead completely normal lives." "Surgery." I whispered the word, my worst fears confirmed. "How dangerous is it?" "All surgery carries risks," Dr. Kessler acknowledged, "but this procedure has a high success rate, especially in a child Liam's age." "When?" Anthony's question was direct, practical. "As soon as possible. I'd recommend scheduling it for early next week. That gives us time to complete a few more specialized tests and get Liam in the best possible condition for surgery." After Dr. Kessler left, I remained frozen in my chair, overwhelmed by the diagnosis, by the thought of my little boy undergoing heart surgery. Anthony moved to kneel before me, taking my cold hands in his warm ones. "He's going to be fine," he said firmly. "Kessler is the best in the country. I made sure of it." I looked into his eyes, those impossibly blue eyes that both our children had inherited. "How can you be so certain?" "Because I won't accept any other outcome." The absolute conviction in his voice was both terrifying and comforting. This was the Anthony I remembered, the man who bent the world to his will through sheer force of determination. "I'm scared," I admitted, the words barely audible. His hands tightened on mine. "I know. But you're not alone anymore, Eliza. We'll face this together. Together." The word hung between us, loaded with implications neither of us was ready to address. "I need to see my mother," I said suddenly. "If Liam is going to be here for days before the surgery." Anthony nodded. "Of course. She's at Seattle Grace Hospice, about 20 minutes from here. Marco can take you this evening once Liam is settled." The fact that he knew exactly where my mother was staying didn't surprise me anymore. Of course he knew. Anthony Russo left nothing to chance. "Thank you," I said, the words feeling insufficient, "for bringing us here, for making sure Liam gets the best care." Something softened in his expression. "He's my son, Eliza. There's nothing I wouldn't do for him." He paused, eyes intent on mine. "For either of them. Or for you." Before I could respond, a nurse entered to inform us that Liam was back in his room, asking for us. The moment broke, and we returned to our son's side. The rest of the day passed in the strange limbo of hospital time. Stretches of tedious waiting punctuated by bursts of activity as doctors and nurses came and went. Anthony worked from Liam's room, making calls and sending emails, seamlessly shifting his empire's operations to Seattle without missing a beat. Occasionally, I caught fragments of his conversations, references to shipments, accounts, territorial disputes resolved with a few carefully chosen words. It was easy to forget, watching him read a picture book to the twins with exaggerated voices that made them giggle, that this was the same man whose name was whispered with fear in Chicago's criminal underworld. Easy to forget, until Marco appeared at the door with a quiet message that made Anthony's expression darken momentarily before he excused himself. "Business," he explained briefly. "I won't be long." In his absence, I helped the nurses get Liam settled for the night. Luna refused to leave her brother, curling up beside him on the hospital bed, despite my gentle attempts to separate them. "Let them be," the night nurse advised with a kind smile. "Sometimes the best medicine is the comfort of someone you love." I watched my twins drift off to sleep, their dark heads close together on the pillow, their breathing synchronized as it had been since before birth. The sight made my chest ache with love and fear. Love for these perfect beings I'd created. Fear for what the future held now that Anthony had found us. As if summoned by my thoughts, he appeared in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "They're asleep?" I nodded. Luna wouldn't leave him. "They're connected," he observed. "More than ordinary siblings. They always have been. Even in the womb, the ultrasound showed them holding hands." Anthony moved to stand beside me, gazing down at our sleeping children. "I missed so much," he said quietly, regret evident in his voice. "Their birth. First steps. First words. Liam's was book," I found myself saying. Luna's was no. They were both early talkers. A small smile touched his lips. "Of course they were. They're Russo's." The simple statement sent a shiver through me, a reminder that these children weren't just mine anymore. They were heirs to the Russo name, to all the power and danger that entailed. "Your mother," Anthony said after a moment. "Marco is ready to take you whenever you'd like." I hesitated, looking back at the twins. "I don't want to leave them. I'll be here," Anthony assured me. "Nothing will happen to them while I'm watching over them." Of that, at least, I was certain. Whatever else Anthony Russo might be, he would protect his children with his life. "Okay," I agreed. "I won't be long." The drive to the hospice was quiet, Marco's silence giving me space with my thoughts. Seattle's lights blurred through rain-streaked windows, the city so different from the small town I'd been hiding in, yet still not the urban jungle of Chicago. I wondered if Anthony would try to take us back there, back to the heart of his empire, or if he'd allow us to start fresh somewhere else. The hospice was tastefully understated, more like a high-end retirement community than a place where people came to die. The receptionist recognized me immediately. "Mrs. Thompson, welcome back. Your mother's been asking for you." I'd visited 3 times in the past 3 months, each time using a different identity, each time watching my once vibrant mother fade a little more. Now, knowing what Anthony had told me, I looked around with new eyes. The expensive artwork on the walls, the fresh flowers at every turn, the staff-to-patient ratio that far exceeded standard care. Had this all been Anthony's doing? My mother's room was at the end of a quiet hallway, with large windows overlooking a garden illuminated by soft landscape lighting. When I entered, she was awake, propped up on pillows, watching the rain. She looked smaller than I remembered, more fragile, the disease eating away at her once sturdy frame. "Eliza," she said using my real name, a name she hadn't spoken aloud in 3 years. "He found you, didn't he?" I froze in the doorway. "What?" She smiled faintly. "Anthony Russo. He came to see me last month." The revelation stunned me into silence. Anthony had visited my dying mother, had sat in this very room, perhaps in the chair beside her bed. What did you talk about?" I finally managed. "You. The twins." She patted the bed beside her, and I sat, taking her frail hand in mine. "He showed me pictures. They're beautiful, Eliza. So like him. You knew who he was? All this time?" She nodded slowly. "I knew you were working for him in Chicago. And I guessed, when you showed up on my doorstep 3 years ago, terrified and pregnant, I guessed who the father was. Why didn't you say anything? Would it have changed your decision to run?" She asked simply. "No," I realized. It wouldn't have. Nothing could have made me stay, not after seeing that file, not after overhearing that conversation between Anthony and Marco. "He's been paying for all this, hasn't he?" I gestured around the luxurious room. "Yes." No apology in her tone. "He came to me directly after finding you. Said he wanted to ensure I received the best care possible, as the grandmother of his children." "And you accepted? From a man like him?" My mother's eyes, still sharp despite her illness, fixed on mine. "A man like him? You mean the father of your children? The man you loved enough to have those children with?" "It wasn't like that," I protested weakly. "I didn't know I was pregnant when I left." "But you loved him." It wasn't a question, so I didn't answer. Instead, I asked, "What did he tell you? About why I ran?" "He said you'd seen something that frightened you. That you misunderstood." She squeezed my hand. "He also said he'd never stopped looking for you. That finding you and the children was all that mattered to him now. Do you believe him?" She considered this. "I believe he loves you, in his way. And I believe he will move heaven and earth for those children." She paused. "He reminds me of your father, in some ways." The comparison startled me. My father had been a construction foreman. Hardworking, strict, utterly devoted to his family. Nothing like the criminal empire builder I'd fled from. "Dad wasn't anything like Anthony," I objected. "Not in circumstances, no. But in nature," she smiled faintly. "That same intensity, the same absolute certainty that he knows what's best for his family. The same willingness to do whatever necessary to protect what's his. The possessive phrase echoed in my mind, reinforcing the truth I'd been avoiding. In Anthony's world, we were his. His children. His woman. His to protect. His to control. "Liam is sick," I said, changing the subject. "We're at Children's Hospital. He needs heart surgery." Concern washed over my mother's face. "Oh, my poor boy. Is it serious?" "Yes, but the doctors say the prognosis is good with surgery." I hesitated. "Anthony brought in specialists. The best in the country." She nodded, unsurprised. "Of course he did." She studied my face. "And now you're conflicted, because the man you've been running from for 3 years is the same man who's saving your son's life." Put that way, it seemed so simple. But nothing involving Anthony Russo was ever simple. "I don't know what to do, Mom," I admitted, feeling like a lost child again. "He won't let us go. Not now that he's found the twins." "Is that really what you want? To keep running?" Her gaze was uncomfortably perceptive. "To keep denying those children their father, a father who clearly adores them? You don't understand what his world is like." "No," she agreed, "but I understand what it's like to raise children alone. To struggle and sacrifice and still come up short sometimes." She squeezed my hand. "And I understand that you've been running for so long. Maybe you've forgotten what you're running towards. Not just what you're running from." Her words struck a nerve. What was I running towards? What kind of life did I envision for the twins? Always looking over our shoulders, always one step ahead of their father, living in cheap apartments and struggling to make ends meet. "I'm afraid," I whispered. Not just of him, but of feeling something for him again. My mother's smile was sad, but knowing. The heart doesn't easily forget, my darling. No matter how much the mind might wish it to. We talked for another hour, about Liam's condition, about Luna's growing vocabulary, about the life I'd built in our small town. Not once did my mother criticize my choices, or pressure me to reconcile with Anthony, but her parting words, as Marco arrived to take me back to the hospital, stayed with me. "Trust yourself, Eliza. You've always had good instincts, and whatever you decide, know that those children are lucky to have both you and their father fighting for them." The drive back to the hospital was as quiet as the journey out had been. My mind whirled with my mother's revelations, with the impossible choices ahead of me. When we arrived, Marco spoke for the first time since we'd left. He would do anything for you, for all of you. His typically impassive face showed a flash of something almost like empathy. "The boss is not an easy man, but he's never been more human than when he's with you." Before I could respond, he was opening my door, escorting me through the private entrance, returning me to the new reality I was still struggling to accept. In Liam's room, I found a scene I never could have imagined 3 days ago. Anthony Russo, feared Mafia boss, asleep in a chair pulled close to the hospital bed, one large hand resting protectively on the mattress between the sleeping twins. Luna had apparently woken at some point and convinced Anthony to read to them. A children's book lay open on his lap. Standing in the doorway, watching the 3 of them breathe in the quiet dimness, I felt something crack inside me, some wall I'd built to protect myself from the truth. The truth that, despite everything, we were a family, broken, complicated, dangerous, but a family nonetheless. And families, as my mother had reminded me, fought for each other, not against each other. The question was, could I find a way to fight alongside Anthony Russo, instead of running from him? The days leading up to Liam's surgery fell into an uneasy rhythm. Anthony transformed a portion of the hospital floor into a command center, running his business empire remotely while never straying far from Liam's room. I spent my time alternating between the hospital and visits to my mother, whose condition had stabilized temporarily, another miracle courtesy of Anthony's specialists. We existed in a strange limbo, Anthony and I, civil, cooperative, focused entirely on Liam's care, yet carefully avoiding any discussion of what would happen after. The twins accepted Anthony's presence with the easy adaptability of children, delighting in the attention he lavished on them. Luna, especially, had become his shadow, fascinated by this new father figure who spoke to her as if her toddler opinions were worthy of serious consideration. "She has your intelligence," Anthony remarked one evening, after Luna had engaged him in a detailed explanation of why elephants were superior to all other animals. "And your determination." "But your charm," I replied without thinking. "God help us all." His smile, a rare, genuine one that reached his eyes, caught me off guard. For a moment, I glimpsed the Anthony I'd fallen in love with, before I'd discovered the darker truths of his world. On the night before Liam's surgery, after both twins had finally fallen asleep, Liam in his hospital bed, Luna on the cot that had been permanently installed beside it, Anthony motioned me to join him in the small sitting area of the suite. "We need to talk," he said quietly, handing me a cup of the herbal tea he'd noticed I preferred. "About what happens after tomorrow." My stomach tightened. Here it was, the conversation I'd been dreading and postponing. "If you're going to tell me you're taking the twins to Chicago, you should know I'll fight you every step of the way," I said, my voice low but firm. "I don't care what resources you have. I won't let you drag them into that life." He studied me for a long moment. "Is that what you think I want? To separate you from our children?" "I don't know what you want, Anthony. You've made it clear you won't let us go, but you haven't exactly outlined your master plan." He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face, a rare gesture of fatigue from a man who prided himself on appearing invulnerable. "I want what any father wants, to protect his family, to provide for them, to be part of their lives, even if it puts them in danger. Your enemies are no longer a concern." His tone was final, absolute. "I've been restructuring over the past few months." I frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means I've been transitioning the organization to legitimate enterprises only. The restaurants, the real estate holdings, the investment portfolio, they've always been profitable on their own. The other operations are being dismantled or transferred." I stared at him, disbelieving. "You're leaving the life? Just like that?" "Not just like that. It's been in motion since I found you and the twins." His eyes held mine steadily. "I told you once that you saw me. Really saw me. What you may not have realized is that you also made me see myself differently. Made me want to be more than what I was." "And your associates? They're just accepting this? Some have been compensated for their loyalty. Others have been persuaded to accept the new direction." The steel in his voice reminded me that, reformed or not, Anthony Russo was still a dangerous man. "The process will take time to complete fully, but the foundation is laid." I processed this information slowly, uncertain what to believe. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because tomorrow our son will undergo major surgery, and life is unpredictable." He leaned forward, his expression more open, more vulnerable than I'd ever seen it. "And because I want you to understand that I'm offering our family, a fresh start." "What kind of fresh start?" "I've purchased property in the San Juan Islands. Private, secure, beautiful. Close enough to Seattle for Liam's follow-up care, but removed from my former life. A place where the twins can grow up with both parents, with every advantage, every opportunity." "Both parents," I repeated. I mean I want you with me, Eliza. Not as a hostage, not out of obligation, but because we belong together, the four of us." The directness of his declaration left me speechless. 3 years I'd spent running from this man, convinced he would destroy me if he found me. Now he sat before me, offering everything I'd ever wanted for my children: security, stability, a father who adored them. And implicitly, something I'd refused to admit I still wanted for myself: him. "I can't just forget everything," I said finally. "The things you've done, the person you've been." "I'm not asking you to," he replied. "I'm asking you to see the person I'm becoming, the person I want to be for them, for you." I looked away, unable to face the intensity in his eyes. I need time, Anthony. It's too much, especially now with Liam's surgery tomorrow. He nodded, accepting this without argument. Take all the time you need. But know this, Eliza. I am not the villain in your story. I never was. Later that night, unable to sleep, I stood by the window of Liam's room, watching the lights of Seattle shimmer through a light rain. Anthony had gone to make calls, giving me space after our conversation. The twins slept peacefully, their matching dark heads stark against white hospital pillows, a fresh start. Was it possible? Could Anthony Russo really leave behind the empire he'd built through violence and fear? Could I trust that the man who'd made me fall in love with him years ago was the real Anthony, not the criminal whose name made hardened men tremble? More importantly, could I trust myself with him again? My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Whatever you decide, follow your heart. It led you to those beautiful children. Maybe it knows something your fear doesn't. Morning came too quickly. Liam was prepped for surgery, his small face solemn as the doctors explained what would happen in terms a toddler could understand. Luna clung to my side, uncharacteristically quiet, sensing the gravity of the situation. I'm going to fix your heart, so you can run and play better, Dr. Kessler told Liam with a gentle smile. Will it hurt? Liam asked, his voice small. You'll be asleep the whole time, the doctor assured him. You won't feel anything. I'll be right here waiting when you wake up, I promised, smoothing his dark hair. And me, Anthony added, his large hand engulfing Liam's tiny one. Daddy will be right here too. As they prepared to take Liam to the operating room, Luna burst into tears, reaching for her twin. Don't want Liam to go. I knelt beside her, heartbreaking at her distress. Liam needs to go with the doctors so they can make him better. We'll see him very soon. She shook her head violently, inconsolable. It was Anthony who found the solution, kneeling beside us both. Luna, Principessa, do you know what a guard is? He asked seriously. She hiccuped, momentarily distracted. Like police? Like a protector. Someone who watches over someone very important. He glanced at me, seeking permission, before continuing. Liam needs a special guard while the doctors help him. Someone brave. Someone who loves him very much. Me? Luna asked, eyes wide. You. Anthony confirmed. But you have to guard him from right here with Mommy and me. Can you do that? Be brave for Liam? Luna considered this, then nodded solemnly. I can be brave. That's my girl, Anthony said softly, and the pride in his voice made my throat tighten. Watching the medical team wheel Liam away was one of the hardest moments of my life. The small figure on the giant gurney, a stuffed elephant clutched to his chest. My baby, about to undergo heart surgery at barely 3 years old. Anthony's hand found mine as the doors closed behind our son. I didn't pull away. The hours of waiting were excruciating. Luna eventually fell asleep on Anthony's lap, exhausted by emotion. He sat perfectly still, unwilling to disturb her, his free hand still holding mine. We barely spoke, each lost in our own fears and hopes. He'll be fine, Anthony said at one point, his voice rough with emotion. He has to be. I looked at him then, really looked, and saw not the feared Mafia boss, but simply a father terrified for his son. In that moment, the walls I'd built between us crumbled a little more. Yes, I agreed. He's strong, like his father. Something shifted in Anthony's eyes. Surprise, then a cautious hope. His fingers tightened around mine. It was nearly 4 hours later when Dr. Kessler finally appeared, still in surgical scrubs. We both stood, Anthony carefully transferring the sleeping Luna to the couch. The surgery was successful, Dr. Kessler announced with a tired smile. We were able to repair the valve rather than replace it, which is the best possible outcome. He's in recovery now and doing well. The relief was so intense I swayed on my feet. Anthony's arm went around me instantly, supporting me. When can we see him? Anthony asked, his voice steadier than mine would have been. In about an hour. He'll be groggy from the anesthesia, but he should recognize you. The doctor's eyes were kind as they moved between us. Your son is going to be just fine. Your son. 2 simple words that linked us inextricably, Anthony and me. Whatever happened between us, we would always share this bond. These children we'd created together. When we finally saw Liam, pale and small in the recovery room with tubes and monitoring equipment surrounding him, I felt Anthony tense beside me. For a man accustomed to controlling everything in his environment, seeing his child like this, vulnerable, hurt, beyond his power to immediately protect, must have been its own kind of torture. Liam's eyes fluttered open as we approached, foggy with medication but seeking familiar faces. "Mommy? Daddy? We're here, sweetheart," I said, carefully taking his hand. "Did they fix my heart?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "Yes, campione," Anthony answered, using the Italian word for champion. "They fixed it. You were very brave. Where's Luna?" "She's sleeping, but she'll be so happy to see you when she wakes up," I assured him. "She's been guarding you, just like Daddy said." Liam nodded, satisfied, before drifting back to sleep, his small chest rising and falling steadily beneath the bandages. Anthony and I stood on either side of his bed, connected by our shared vigil, our shared love for this fragile life between us. The days that followed brought a gradual return to strength for Liam. His recovery was remarkable, the doctors said, faster than they'd expected. Within a week, he was sitting up, playing with Luna, the color returned to his cheeks. Another week, and he was cleared to leave the hospital, with regular follow-up appointments scheduled. Throughout it all, Anthony remained a constant presence. Efficient, protective, attentive to every detail of Liam's care. I watched him with our children, saw how naturally he'd stepped into the role of father, as if the 3 missing years had never happened. I also visited my mother daily, grateful for the unexpected gift of more time with her. The hospice doctors were cautiously optimistic about a new treatment Anthony had arranged. Not a cure, but potentially months of extended life instead of weeks. "Have you decided?" she asked me one afternoon as we sat in the hospice garden. "About Anthony's offer?" News traveled fast between Anthony and my mother, I'd discovered. They'd developed an unexpected rapport, united by their shared love for me and the twins. "How did you know about that?" she smiled. "He asked for my blessing. This surprised me." "And what did you tell him?" "That my blessing wasn't the one he needed to worry about." She patted my hand. "But I also told him that I've never seen you look at anyone the way you looked at him. Even now. Even after everything. Is it that obvious? Only to someone who knows you as well as I do." She studied my face. "You're afraid that loving him means condoning what he's done." I nodded, relieved that she understood. How can I reconcile the man he is with the twins, with the man he's been in his other life? People are complicated, Eliza. All of us contain multitudes. She gazed out at the garden, thoughtful. "Your father once broke a man's jaw for insulting me. Did I tell you that?" I stared at her. "Dad did that?" She nodded. "Before we were married, the man had been harassing me for weeks. Your father warned him once, then put him in the hospital the next time." She looked back at me. "Does that one act of violence negate the loving father you knew? The man who read you bedtime stories and taught you to ride a bike?" "That's different," I protested. "One fight isn't the same as what Anthony has done. The scale is different, yes, but the principle?" She shrugged. "I'm not telling you what to do, darling. Just suggesting that people can be more than the worst things they've done. They can change if they have a good enough reason." That evening, after putting the twins to bed in the luxury hotel suite Anthony had arranged near the hospital, I found him on the balcony, looking out over the Seattle skyline. He'd discarded his suit jacket and rolled up his sleeves, a glass of whiskey untouched beside him. "We need to talk," I said, echoing his words from before Liam's surgery. He turned, his expression guarded. "About the future, the San Juan Islands, your proposal." He studied me, careful not to reveal too much. "And?" I took a deep breath. "I want to believe you're serious about leaving that life behind, but I need more than words, Anthony. I need proof." "What kind of proof?" "Time," I said simply. "I want 6 months. We'll live in this place you've bought, the 4 of us together. But I keep my own funds, my own car, the freedom to leave if I choose." His jaw tightened. "You're still planning to run?" "No." I met his gaze steadily. "I'm planning to stay, to try to build something real. But I need to know I'm choosing it freely, not because I have no other option." He considered this. "And after 6 months, if you're really leaving that life behind, If we can build something good together, something healthy for the twins, then I'll stay. Permanently. As my wife? He asked directly. The question sent a jolt through me. Let's start with co-parents and see where it leads. A slight smile touched his lips. Always cautious, my Eliza. With good reason, I reminded him. He nodded, acknowledging this. 6 months, your own resources, freedom to choose. He extended his hand. Do we have a deal? I took his hand, feeling the familiar warmth, the strength in his grip. We have a deal. 2 days later, we left Seattle, heading for the San Juan Islands. My mother had been settled into a private care facility on the mainland, close enough for regular visits. The twins were excited for the adventure, as Anthony had described it to them. The property, when we arrived, took my breath away. A modern cedar and glass house perched on a bluff overlooking the water, surrounded by towering pines, private, secure, yet open to the beauty of the Pacific Northwest. Inside was equally impressive. Spacious, filled with light, with a playroom for the twins that made their eyes go wide with wonder. Do we live here now? Luna asked, already claiming a bedroom with a window seat overlooking the water. For now, I answered, watching Anthony's expression carefully. Forever, he corrected, his eyes on mine. A promise, not a command. The weeks that followed brought a strange new normal. Anthony worked remotely, his business calls conducted behind closed doors, but never concealed from me. True to his word, he was dismantling certain aspects of his empire, legitimizing others. I watched carefully for signs of the old Anthony, the dangerous one, but saw only the man determined to build a new life for his family. The twins flourished in our new home. Liam grew stronger each day, his heart healing, his energy returning. Luna appointed herself his protector, a role she took very seriously to Anthony's obvious pride. They called him Daddy now without hesitation, running to him when he appeared, demanding stories and games and the undivided attention he gave so willingly. And slowly, cautiously, Anthony and I began to rediscover each other, not as boss and employee, not as pursuer and fugitive, but as two people who had once loved each other deeply, who shared 2 perfect children, who might, against all odds, find their way back to something true. It wasn't always easy. We argued about parenting approaches, about my independence, about the shadows of his past that sometimes darkened our present. But we talked too, more honestly than we ever had in Chicago, about our fears, our hopes for the twins, our complicated feelings for each other. I never stopped loving you, he admitted one night, as we sat on the deck after the twins were asleep, watching the moonlight on the water. Even when I thought you'd betrayed me, I couldn't stop. I thought you wanted to kill me, I confessed. That night, when you said you'd handle it, I was terrified. He took my hand, his expression pained. I've done many things I'm not proud of, Eliza, but I could never have hurt you, never. Gradually, inevitably, we found our way back to each other, a touch lingering longer than necessary. A glance held across the dinner table, the electricity that had always existed between us, impossible to deny. The first time he kissed me again, really kissed me, not the careful pecks we'd exchanged in front of the twins. It was like coming home, his lips on mine, his hands in my hair, the solid warmth of him making me realize how cold I'd been for 3 long years. Stay, he whispered against my mouth, not just for them, for us. 4 months into our 6-month trial, I knew my decision was already made. Watching Anthony with the twins, teaching Liam to fish off our private dock, patiently braiding Luna's hair exactly as she instructed, reading them stories each night with different voices for every character. I saw the man I'd fallen in love with in Chicago, the man who, despite his flaws, despite his past, loved with a fierceness and devotion that took my breath away, and I loved him. Still, again, always. Despite everything, or perhaps because of it, because he'd fought to change, to be worthy of the family we'd created together. On a clear autumn evening, with the twins finally asleep after an exhausting day of beach exploration, Anthony found me on our deck, wrapped in a blanket against the cooling air. 6 years ago today, he said, sitting beside me, was your first day at Russo Enterprises. I looked at him in surprise. You remember the exact date? He smiled. That rare, genuine smile that still made my heart skip. I remember everything about you, Eliza. From the moment you walked into my office, you changed something in me. He reached for my hand. I didn't know it then, but I started becoming the man I am now, the man I want to be. The day I met you. And who is that man? I asked softly. A father. A partner. He paused, his blue eyes, the eyes our children had inherited, fixed on mine. A husband, if you'll have me. My breath caught as he produced a small velvet box. Inside was a ring I recognized. The same one he'd described having in his safe the night I fled. A cushion-cut diamond surrounded by sapphires the exact color of his eyes. This was waiting for you 3 years ago, he said quietly. It's still waiting now, along with my heart. I looked from the ring to the man holding it. This complicated, powerful, devoted man who had moved heaven and earth to find us, who had changed his entire life to keep us, who loved our children with the same fierce intensity with which he loved me. Yes, I said simply. His smile was like the sunrise. He slipped the ring onto my finger, then pulled me into his arms, his kiss a promise of all the tomorrows we would share. Upstairs, as if sensing the moment, Luna called out sleepily, "Daddy? Mommy?" Anthony laughed softly against my lips. Duty calls. We went to our children together, hand in hand. The past finally behind us, the future, our future as a family, stretching out before us, bright with promise. I had run from the Mafia boss pregnant, terrified of the life he represented. He had found me with twins who looked just like him, determined to claim what was his. But what we discovered in the end was something neither of us had expected. Redemption, forgiveness, and a love powerful enough to change even the most unlikely of hearts, including our own.